Maria Bartiromo. A number of people at Hartford Hospital have been faking transcripts, and with people with triages across the country, where they have forced mental evaluations, where people have to raise their voices, for example, because people won't address things. I caught them enforcing child abusers, leaders, and kids years apart, and a whole bunch of other natures and methods of organized crimes roles at the same time. Whole bunch of police forms and interbranch families readings of law that say, "Oh, we have the right to lie," and they use it where they don't have the right to lie as collusion/s. Get them off the fake conversations with me. I asked you guys through the thing. The Wethersfield police, they faked me being at the police station and communicating with them as a kid, fake me ties to them and other people, fake nature ties to them and other people, and now as an adult. And I caught them doing that with other kids. Retired police chiefs and their families' intimate ties and their own intimate ties have roles with proven child abusers, leaders, and kids years apart, first forced, and people planting evidences on my street and on the streets of the kids to cover up the lie progressions. Because there's a method here that keeps that country's A through Z. A bunch of suits and ties, counters, and exceptions as collusions/s. So you guys have roles with all these subjects, and you guys force them apart. You guys are being used to sense and say no one's going to address any of it properly. You guys are changing, faking. That's part of the reason we're the child abusers. Wethersfield Police and the FBI have roles with whiting forensics too, changing digital evidences and wire crimes as collusions with crime scenes that all identities of law had through other natures of organized crimes in their roles with their methods and uses of their difference/s. Forgiveness is so we don't leave out the breaching method. That is recorded here involved too. But you guys won't allow mandated law follow. Get me off the fake conversations with WFSB. CBS has roles with the intelligence there and next to them. Also, as people involved with the intelligence at and next to Fox Connecticut News. Also involved with the intelligence at and next to WTNH and the differences of their guilt. And they're keeping the mass numbers. A bunch of people tied to a Fred Grisey have multiple judges involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and foreign and domestic, all kinds of medicines crimes. And those databases that no one's allowed to look in, they're putting whole fake transcripts there to cover up what they'd be used for. A bunch of judges involved with a Dearborn Street in Newington and conjunctions to it and to that. A bunch of people tied to a 80 Carriage Hill Drive with a Ray Collo. Two people named Ray Collo are involved with a Joshua Julian with a Facebook page of a principal child abuser. Per them and him, but they don't even know where they're confessing. I don't know. I'm saying nothing because these are people who have been fabricating police reports and fake ties to me with the police that are involved with that too through time. Those are people that did go down to the police station and speak with them and gave affidavits about how they changed and fake what they said. And me, they just pretended to be down there to cover up lie progressions. Chris Walters and Ray Collo, years apart, that confessed that there's people with the name Bose and a bunch of people at Trinity College and next to them and at Central Connecticut State University and next to them. They have collusions with them, with identity theft, fraud, slander, sequenceships, and roles with the names like former director of the FBI, collusions with them, putting fake things in databases, fake transcripts, whether they realize it or not, in other words, relative to their own predicate acts. Like, for example, I never saw a Donald Conch inside of a campus in my life. There are proofs that they took a picture of me standing there. I never had a word of a conversation with her in my life, Donald LaConch. She's one of the ones involved with some home break-ins in my area and wire and mail crime acts and methods I recorded that interbranch self-value roles with. But to observe what type are evidentially recorded too. It's in the form of them faking transcripts. Whiting forensics, since I was a kid, is increasingly involved also with people out of the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices with the World Trade Center attack. So they brought World Trade Center predicate acts rules with child abusers, multiple police forms, the differences of their guilt, even the ones at the news networks. And you guys only say guilty. In other words, it's also recorded because you won't respond. You pretend you don't realize that you have rules of wire crime acts and methods. The networks have a recorded, confessed, demonstrate from. They have it's at least plausible that they have wire crime acts and methods and collusions with the intelligence families and people from off them, or the difference of their own roles with it, changing and faking what's actually digitally recorded. So the news and the interbranch put fake transcripts and evidences where I caught them forcing a principal child abuser with their kids. And they charged me with harassment at a school. I didn't even get to speak with them. They made me keep calling back and keep making more confessions and confirmations and saying things that weren't true. And then they said I had to call back, and then me get all these callbacks to make me call back a bunch of times, and then lie about that too. The people charging people, they already painted themselves in corners, all kinds of natures of organized crimes and methods of them, with the state judicial branch offices of Connecticut and the corrections offices. A bunch of people they're involved with Heather Hansen said that there's a Mark Halperin's house, and the death of his mother was involved with other people. She was involved with also Joe DeMoro with some home break-ins. And there's more than one Joe DeMoro, and they're in different cities. And a Tony DeMoro from Rocky Hill and Joe DeMoro from Wethersfield, and people tied to them, and with the ones involved with wire crimes of the police and stuff. They have and typing in comments. They have rules with that with the corner of Southstein Highway and Town Line Drive through town, with the owners of the buildings and the people that work for them and the people just going by with a whole bunch of different countries, as their rules with people named Scalora too. The police forms too confess the name Scalora involved with them, with identity theft, fraud, slanders, falsified police reports, with sexual and medical offenders of kids, and untimely death rolls. And that was also people that murders were brought up, tied to the people involved with the untimely deaths. And these things recorded on Facebook and but they can't afford to have discerned what was recorded on Facebook because they already had collusions replacing what was recording. And Facebook itself personally has a bunch of people all along Wells Road, all along Route 175 and Main Street locations. There's a Celeste Wells. I never had a class with her. They tried to put that there are a bunch of people with Wethersfield police, like a Joe DeMoro, a Kerr family. I never had a class with DeMoro or a Kerr. They're putting fake things in the databases, fake ties, fake natures of ties between people. At the same time, their collusions with organized crimes, plural. And then they start confessing to me and others. So they have a bunch of people with the Britain Superior Court, Harper Courts, and Connecticut's District Court who have collusion/S with all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders, federal evidences crimes, abuses of children. The same families involved with that are involved with the elderly homes, elderly programs. It's the only help capable of them because we're in a system that measures and maintains problems, and then problems if you don't have the types of experts, and then problems that never addressed because it's either this or that. In other words, we entertain systems A through Z at countries A through Z that have been abridged / hyper abridged. They haven't even addressed how slavery was northern colonies and southern colonies, more than 13, and entrenched the way our founders left it to be addressed, because they still have replaced the value of our founders' words and their actual words with the ones and their actual communications, rather, with their words used, leaving out what they declassified about why no one had free speech. What was actually, in other words, this is right through. That's why in America and in Russia, they speak about technology. And in other words, they're not speaking about it honestly here or there, because the suburbs were designed before America's founders were even born. They didn't even have cars yet. And it was slavery entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies, Native Americans against Native Americans, all human differences to keep everyone blaming what nature's demonstrating because we've been using systems tactical ulterior from how and why it communicates with individual species body of a whole bunch of individual bodies, a different individual species body of a whole bunch of individual bodies, and a whole bunch of other individual species bodies of a whole bunch of individual bodies. And we are shown the identity value progression that generates this. And I also need to bring this up because there are religious spots involved with abuses of each age of fact treatment nature multi-front. The interbranch family members are incapable. So it's a certain type of, everyone's a certain type of victim / hyper victim relative to collusions / S that everyone was only allowed to self-value roles with. And the easiest way to discern this is where and how you have self-value roles, preventing, or you know that you can observe how others have self-value roles, preventing the hyper-evidential with black people's whites of eyes, having the same colorized, different colorized at the same time, projected to us by that which is generating totally different individual species bodies of individual bodies. So nature is also projecting about difference, communicating about difference with better than words, because it's one identity of volume that none other could mimic, but no volume could be its own volume without being that one too. Even anything made up has the order of the finite, and or the finite, the order of what is grouped and or active, what is simultaneous, individually grouped together, showing up, come with means for us to discern and to appreciate the hyper simultaneous. Just like this is what we are shown that nature wants us to appreciate, not just why and how, only individually to an or finite to an extent, finite grouped. We can appreciate subjects only individually grouped or simultaneous to an extent. And with that, we can discern its identity relationship to it with parts that are greater than and more finite and with active relativity to this, that we could still appreciate anyway, but only if we use its method and demonstration / S to us and to all things. But we have business systems A through Z, with business systems also tactical ulterior from that quality of fact should be nature necessary. So I was one of the people next to the World Trade Center, the news and the networks and their intelligence, including with the FBI directors, with his co-defendants and their family members, and multiple courts and interbranch family members of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, foreign and domestic military. They colluded at West Hartford locations and at town lines before the World Trade Center attack, with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, in courts. Also with a Dean Judd and his kid from Central Connecticut State University, and a Dean Alford, and other people tied to him on New Britain Avenue through time. A guy, Dean Bells, was also influenced to and I didn't respond. I don't know. No, he was a nice kid and everything like that. These are people involved with the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and courts family members. Courts involved with foreign countries and putting fake things in databases, all kinds of drugs and medicines crimes, as their families roles with the people that are undercover, and roles with the state corrections offices and the state judicial branch offices, with Hartford Hospital with drugs and medicines crimes. Also next to campuses, intercities, as the intelligence has connections to people next to the campuses in Hartford and Connecticut, Wethersfield and Rocky Hill and New Britain. These people and things are connected, and there are criminally foreign influence uses of that. There is a hyper-criminally foreign influence use of that, and all roles with it as uses of it, as styles that a breaching method used to hide behind and through. F countries A through Z, that's really why and how. Suburbs in America and Russia, they look almost exactly alike, the houses, the way they're built. Even though it was a part of that torture, extortion, in fact, human nature, slavery method that didn't even allow our founders free speech. And they directed us to understand why and how James Madison's the only founder they had the security to let us know the name of individually. And nature itself shows us. And then hyper additionally, the chief, it helps us. President, the difference between president or chief, it helps us discern it too. What nature shows us too. And when the Constitution's unwritten, we can discern clear. In other words, that breaching method against all human differences. No, but in other words, that all Native Americans are our founders too. But there are proofs that there was a portion of them that agreed with and helped, even though I didn't read that. In other words, what I read that everyone's forcing replaced, and how they get away with it is recorded. You can't call the police because they'll just change the police forms in the courts. They just self-value rules with a whole bunch of different countries. With needs, nature, styles, they do things like change and fake what's actually recorded. They already faked conversation with me at the police station when I was a kid and as an adult. Fake ties to me with these Mendez police. They have roles with sexual and medical offenders, intercities of kids. These are people next to the news networks. And these Mendez brothers have roles with New Britain Superior Court with a bunch of people. With the FBI director, Robert Luskin, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids. And their roles with fake conversation with me, with the older Mendez brother. And the Eric Mendez is recorded involved with all kinds of predicate acts with people with the state judicial branch offices. And people named Mr. Potter and his family with the state judicial branch offices. And others and next to the locations, like the state judicial branch office, the corrections offices, and the guilt there and or next to it. The same thing with the police department. There are proofs that it's that way with the courts too. And it's that way with campuses, including medical and fire. West Hartford Fire campuses, Hartford Fire campuses, families. Weathersfield Fire campuses, families. We're not even know. There are roles with Russians and Americans. And there's a Peruta family that was in my 6th grade class. I had pretty much nothing to do with him. They tried to make it look like other. When I was a kid, tried to make a fake exception. And when I was an adult. And those are people increasingly the FBI has collusions /S with corners of streets. With their roles with other Russians I don't know the names of. And they brought up that they were not Russian. These are people that at Hartford Hospital involved with the Leahy family. Is also involved with sexual and medical offenders with New Britain Superior Courts, personally and professionally involved with the Leahy family, and one's named Lombardo, who also people when I was a kid, now as an adult too. Again, they make confessions. There's a Leahy family involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids at campuses, putting fake things in databases, identity thefts, fraud, slanders, and then roles planting evidences on all sides of people's houses. These are also people involved with the families of 9/11, 911 police phones, where they have collusions, faking, and changing transcripts. So the police forms that do this too, they're recorded themselves, threatening people with the courts too, faking conversations and transcripts in their databases, collusions with crime scenes, organized crime groups, child abusers force. The same families are involved with elderly homes and switching the names on streets tied to it. Increasingly, Two Rod Highway and Hangdog Lane has people that went out of their way, I don't know at all, others that went out of their way to make it look like other, to plant evidences. Increasingly, people tied to Weathersfield mayors are involved with that, and judges and prosecutors and people with whiting forensics. There's a Phil Collo involved with a Victorian house on 2-Route Highway, and there are some probate court judges involved with that house, and with the house next to it, and with their extended family members involved with other probate court judges, and they have that area involved through time with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and a Dr. Shub of modern languages has roles with translators, for example, with the World Trade Center predicate acts relative, and roles with the attack. There's differences, rackets. Dr. Shuba of Modern Languages has some probate courts that and people that work with the probate courts and their intimate ties involved with his family and kids. And he sought me out to confess and demonstrate this. I didn't tell him the extent of it because the other people that also recorded, confess, demonstrate, confirm him also rolls with him with that, with Town Lines and with him. These are people with Town Line Drive. I mean, 2-Route High, but also with 2-Route Highway, where it runs into Hangdog Dog Lane. And I don't know their names at that Victorian house. And the people on the street will tell you, there were like a Mazzucato bakery is also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed with threats and verdict like through time to make it look like, and then if you respond to it, it makes it look like you knew the person. They went out of their way to plant a Mazzucato bakery, and with retired police chiefs, they have roles with the judges and prosecutor, also with their intimate ties, with the drugs and medicines, where they have legitimate roles with that, where they use it illegitimately, and they have roles, all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders, all kinds of evidences, rackets. These are also people with the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices, and with the prisons recorded demonstrably collusions with crime scenes before they happen, and with the courts. The courts have been collusions with crime scenes since founding. For example, not just the police forms, the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones, terrorists. Everyone loves the word extremism, radical. The nature of debate contains quality aspects in nature that can't be defended, but as collusions. Needs self-body rules, forcing quality fact should be nature, forcing mandated law not followed. Well, we don't, that's not our job. That's why get them on paper. And then the same people have to pretend to say, oh, no one's above the law. You guys are out here making conspiracy theories and covering it up with the interbranch. And in other words, that's why it's important to admit how A through Z, a bunch of fake countries, A through Z. We have the suburbs that were designed for torture, extortion, slavery methods. The only reason that appears to be debate is because everyone's styles, needs, nature's roles, preventing mandated law unless it's that fake collusion originally instilled. Same way our founders knew that everyone would be. That's why we were directed to understand the only founder's name we know is James Madison. That's why they declassified enough for us to understand why and how, even once he was president, he didn't have free speech, James Madison. But everyone was still forced to follow his plan. I'll stand, I'll rise. In other words, please, Fox Business, please help. It is mandated that either Weathersfield Police won't identify themselves legitimately, been forging names, switching names, sticking fake things in their databases since I was a kid. Intercities are involved with people. Also intern and truck campuses with predicate acts and with predicate acts methods. This is how to fix education too, where everyone's going to understand James Madison, the difference between him and president/chiefs. Once he was a president/chief, he still didn't have free speech. Everyone's going to discern that breaching method against Native Americans first, because it never stopped being against every human difference. And in other words, for sequence, still, in the nature of debate, everyone's going to observe how things that people are making examples of themselves with free speech, and they're jumping into people's arguments to prevent mandated law from being followed properly. So you get that police chief Cintron and these Mendez police on paper within the Britain Superior Court and the Harper Courts and the District Court. Their people and their families are involved too. Why don't they just do what's right and get on paper so they don't have to bring in their families? That would be probably just on them. put it on themselves rather than their family members. And get the Leahy family already has a little daughter in it too. Get them off the fake conversations and ties to me. This Leahy family involved with multiple courts and prosecutors and judges and victims advocates at the same time, involved with them with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, identity theft, fraud, slanders, and delusions raw. Get them off the fake conversation with me. Get them onto paper now. Bunch of people involved with them on my street, like a Rick Cianfaglione, also sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. What intelligence families near me have a Rick Cianfaglione involved with them with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and a Brian Silver and others with the courts, putting fake things in databases. And the Leahy family with Harper, a bunch of people at Harvard Hospital and the houses and businesses next to it, they have connections to each other. And one of the things that connects them is time collusions with all kinds of investigators, all sides of criminal civil cases. The courts, names next to the World Trade Center and next to the Connecticut Judicial Branch offices, next to the state corrections offices, increasingly planting evidences, fake ties, fake nature of ties to me, or uses of exceptions, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. And O'Brien family has roles with people named Pianza too, Intercities, and next to the networks, next to Fox Connecticut News, and next to WFSB, also has their collusions increasingly with a bunch of sources of WTNH. And demonstrably the FBI involved with wire crime acts and methods with them, changing, faking, which over the phone. They just fake more phone transcripts, whatever, to cover up their. All the people need to integrity. People don't need integrity. That's why they're making everyone make allegations and go fishing for a list and things like that on dishonestly as collusion/s. Let's pay attention to the people with the World Trade Center predicate acts. Do things in order first too. Get the Connecticut Interbranch, record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. They refuse to identify themselves legitimately, so they could hide fake things in databases to cover up with that. With the breaching method shows them they have to hide, but they're actually recorded value. Their sequence shifts they've been covering up. Their predicate acts with facts methods. I'm not even a lawyer. I don't have to be. Lawyers all sides of criminal and civil cases involved with the wire crime acts and methods recorded. Please do what's right. For CBS, they won't help. They fake World Trade Center attack. They have a bunch of police forms interfering with them, influencing them this way. Foreign and domestic military, including Saudis and people in intercities with the police departments that have connections. A bunch of people tied to Mendez. I don't know where they live. There's a name Mendez next to a Montessori school in West Hartford that's involved with a Sioka. A Christina Sioka has a bunch of people recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed from Miami.